Hello, Martin Murray here, and this is the panel at DublinBIC. Today is the 3rd of April 2020, and we are, of course, in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. Just going to call out one statistic. The central bank here in Ireland has issued figures just today to say that over the next 3-month period, they see a contraction in the economy happening to the tune of 8.3%. And if the lockdown goes on for another 3 months, they envisage that the contraction in the economy will be 15%. In order to discuss today some of the issues that businesses are coming up with and how they're dealing with them, I have with me Paula Finnan, HR Manager with DublinBIC, Dorina Mulligan, Executive and Leadership Coach with Camino Coaching, and Orla O'Brien, the Head of Corporate Law Firm OBH Partners. You're all very welcome.
Thanks, Martin.
Good morning, Martin.
Paula, if I could come to you first, I know you've been investigating the kind of supports that are available to businesses now in Ireland. Could you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, so I think I'll start off maybe with the supports that are available for people that may have lost their jobs in the last number of weeks. So basically, the first one would be the pandemic unemployment payment, and that's for anybody that's lost their job due to the COVID-19 crisis, or anybody also that is self-employed and no longer has work as a result of the crisis also. It's €350 per week, and it's available for the duration of the crisis, which at the moment they've earmarked for 12 weeks, but that's unknown at the moment. I suppose just to give a couple of stats there, kind of on the back of what you mentioned there, Martin, about the economy. Basically, yesterday they would have released stats around the number of people availing of that pandemic unemployment payment. It's up to over 283,000. If you add in the people that are availing of the wages subsidy scheme, which I'll talk about later, it's 26,000. So add in the number of people that are already availing of jobless state benefit, that brings it up to 513,000, which in that context, in light of the economic downturn in 2008, the number of people on the live register would have been at 450,000. So we've exceeded that in 3 weeks, which is shocking. The second support there that I wanted to mention for employees would be the enhanced illages for people that have contracted COVID-19, or for people that have been directed by a medical professional to stay at home and self-isolate. The self-isolation payment will be paid for 2 weeks, and if you've contracted the virus, it will be 10 weeks, depending on, I suppose, the severity of your sickness with the virus. And moving on then to, I suppose, the supports for the employers. A new scheme that has been out by the Department of Finance and done through Revenue, which is the wages subsidy scheme. 36,000 employers have already signed up to this. So basically, the government have rolled this out to support employers to keep employees paid throughout the economic crisis that we're experiencing as a result of COVID-19. It means that employers can continue to pay their workforce throughout the crisis, even if the people are being put on temporary layoff or temporary reduced hours. And hopefully then at the end of the crisis, when we go back to full operation, they'll still have their workforce there ready to go, and it'll have maintained the relationship between the employer and the employee, which is very important for both parties. There's eligibility criteria for this, and I suppose 2 ones that I wanted to mention was that one of them would be that if you can prove that you will have, you will experience a 25% decrease in your turnover in Q2 as a result of COVID-19, you will be eligible. Secondly, if for startups and scale-ups, if you can prove that you've experienced a decline of 25% of investment in this period, you would also be eligible. So I'd recommend employers to have a look at gov.ie and look at all the other proof points there, because there's a range of them, but you'd be guided best by that link. I suppose just to mention the brackets then that of the support that the employer will get for their employees. So if your employee was earning 38,000 or under, the refund from revenue would be €410 per week. Now the employer also has the option to top that up so that the employee might come out with their net take-home income, but it's at the employer's discretion to do that. Then secondly, the second bracket would be if the employee was earning between 38 and 76,000, the employer will receive a €350 refund from revenue on that salary. Again, the employer can top that up. And then finally, if people are earning over 76,000, the wages subsidy scheme actually doesn't allow for that. So those people are being directed towards the pandemic unemployment payment. And just to kind of reinforce how important that scheme is, and it's been highly commended and welcomed by the whole employer community. It's so important for the employer. It means that they have a workforce, they're ready to go, fully trained and capable when we do return to business as usual. For the employee, it means they have an income of some sort. It means they have a role and a purpose every day. So for their mental health and for their sense of purpose, that's keeping them going, I guess. And for their families and communities, it means that there's less people unemployed, and it just has a sort of a better effect then on both parties there as well. And then finally, I wanted to mention if your company doesn't qualify for the wages subsidy scheme, so that would be companies that perhaps are semi-state or are sort of more non-commercial entities, you can avail of the standard short-term working, which would mean that if you need to reduce your employees' hours and you're putting them from a 5-day week down to 3 days or less, you would continue to pay them for those 3 days, but then your employee can avail of short-time social welfare support. And they will get, I think it's around €40 a day for the 2 days that they're not working with you. So there was a concern around that employers, if you were putting people on that short time scheme previously, if your employee is on that for more than 4 consecutive weeks, the employee could claim redundancies for employees that were with your organisation more than 2 years. But because of the emergency that we're in currently, there has been emergency legislation brought in so that throughout the period March 16 to May 31st, employees cannot apply for or claim redundancy, and that protects the employer so that they can put their employees on short-term working and they won't have to face any sort of further financial constraints at the end of the crisis in relation to redundancy claims or anything like that. I think they're the main supports I wanted to mention today. I think for anybody, employee or employer, I would go on to gov.ie and I would read through all the different links. It's been updated every day, and especially the wages subsidy scheme, the criteria is quite detailed. So I think you just need to read through that and understand what exactly does that apply to your company. And I suppose just to note there as well, because I suppose there's such a huge demand on that scheme, it's going to be like a self-assessment. So you apply yourself, you assess yourself, and revenue are nearly taken for granted that you're being honest and true in your self-assessment. And obviously they would follow back with you later in the year if that wasn't the case. But yeah, that's everything I suppose from my side.
Paula, thank you very much for that. I'm really struck by one statistic you called out there, that the number of people who are receiving unemployment-related welfare benefits, I think it's up to now about 16% of the workforce. It'll soon be at about 500,000 people. That's taken 1 month to happen with the COVID-19 pandemic. We did get to that level of unemployment after the 2008 financial crisis, but it took 4 years. So what happened in 4 years back then has now happened in 1 month, which is extraordinary. I just call out one other item regarding the pandemic unemployment benefit. Unusually for a welfare payment here in Ireland, it's also available to the self-employed, which of course would be the case for many of our clients in DublinBIC and for many people in the owners of small businesses and so on. Thank you very much for that information. Doreen Mulligan, you're working with business leaders every day. What are the business leadership challenges that are arising as a result of the pandemic, and what sort of advice are you giving to people around that?
Martin. Yeah, I mean, like everybody, business leaders are facing an unprecedented time, and they are used to dealing with different challenges, but nothing at this scale. And I guess the first thing that I would say is I've just seen a phenomenal display of grit and determination and creativity and innovation where possible, and really just an ability to dig deep and face what's coming up at them on a daily basis. And part of that is dealing with feeling really fearful and nervous and anxious about what's coming ahead, and finding ways to deal with their own capability and their own mental health really on a day-to-day basis, to be able to make the big decisions that they need to make, because that is what's obviously had to happen. And Paula and those statistics that you just pulled out there are proof of that. So really, and I guess, you know, we're kind of 3 or 4 weeks in, the school's closed 3 weeks today, and it's been for everyone, and including all business leaders, a real roller coaster. And I think I had my first real light bulb moment around it about a week before, where I was with a client, and she was saying that, you know, her employees were saying, well, what is our message? What do we say? What do we do? What is the answer? And she was saying, I don't know. And then in this moment of reality, or light bulb moment, she just said, I need to know. I need to come up with some answers for them, because I am the business leader here and they are looking to me for answers. And I think we both had the same light bulb moment at the same time. It wasn't new news that she was the owner or the leader of this business, but it was just suddenly, in the face of all this uncertainty, she had to give some answers and lead. And that's what I've seen across, that's kind of been almost the central point of all of the decision, or all of the conversations that I've been having over the last 3 to 4 weeks, is to really truly lead, you need to make some decisions and decide what is the way forward, and then make some hard decisions based on that. But somebody needs to go out in front and make those decisions and show how we're going to go forward, as difficult as that is. And speed of response has been absolutely critical, because it's the fairest thing to do to everybody, including actually the leader themselves, because at least once you have made the decision, and that's not suggesting by any means knee-jerk reaction decisions, they are well thought through and talked through with business advisors and close people, but equally in a very, very timely manner, and getting out with the speed of response, so that employees and people close to them know what is happening to the best of their knowledge. And as always, that communication has worked best when it's been authentic, honest, and when leaders have gone, I don't know also about where this is going, I'm making these decisions now, and here's what we're going to do for a week or a month. One of my clients suggested, you know, all salaries would be cut for 50% for April, and then we will make another decision, because I don't know what's going to happen at the end of April. So it's not suggesting that all leaders need to have all of the answers, but it's communicating to people as quickly as possible and in the fairest way possible. And as we were speaking about a little bit before we came on to this recording, it's, you know, being honest about the fact that actually we're feeling it too. You know, we don't know where this is going to, we don't know where we're going to be in summer, and that's an unusual and scary place. So by recognizing it, it almost makes it, there's almost some solidarity in that as well, and also makes the business leader appear honest and truthful, because nobody is immune to what this really, really means. So I guess the challenges that means people are facing is, obviously businesses have completely changed. A number of clients I'm dealing with have gone from, you know, a pipeline of whatever to literally zero overnight. And that's unthinkable. You know, everyone makes, you know, in my work with leaders, we've always had plan B, C, and D, but we've never considered, well, what happens if it goes to completely zero? So this is absolutely new thinking for a lot of businesses. And again, this is where some amazing creativity has come in, and innovation and rethinking and reformatting. But something else that has come in, which is something we find very, very difficult to do, and business leaders, especially, and entrepreneurs, because they're so dynamic, but pausing is a strategy at times, and it is sometimes the absolutely right strategy. And I think we have a fear as humans that pausing or stopping means giving up or being lazy or all of these things. But actually, when it is a considered business decision, it can often be the absolutely right thing to do. And pausing can just give you headspace and time to consider what other options there are. So I've seen that being used as a very, very clever and very strategic and the most appropriate thing to do at this moment. And it's been a brave decision, actually, in some respects.
Darina, thank you. Great advice. It really resonates with me, the timely and authentic communication, and absolutely pausing in order to get perspective. Speaking as an unfortunate veteran of the 2000-2001 dot-com bust and the 2008 financial crisis, particularly for entrepreneurs who are doing this first time around, it's a completely new set of decision making that has to happen, completely new environment, and it can be very, very difficult the first time. And the advice you offer there, I think, is actually is absolutely on point. Thank you for that. Orla, if I could come to you, please. As head of corporate law firm OBH Partners, you're dealing with startup and scale-up enterprises every day, typically who are involved in investment rounds. Can you give us an indication what's happening in that marketplace now? Is investment still happening? Has it come to a complete stop? Are businesses looking at alternative sources? What's happening?
Well, our experience is that if it was fairly advanced, they're completing out, and kind of they have been doing in the last week or two. But for most of businesses, be they startup, scale up or otherwise, there's just been a complete drop in revenue and a complete stop. And that's the biggest worry. So they're looking at all the issues that Paul had talked about. And so they're looking at what they can do in terms of, employees. But a lot of them don't even have employees at this stage. So they're looking at the self-employed, resources that are available. There are a number of new funding alternatives that have been kind of popped up over the last few weeks. We probably haven't yet seen how they're becoming available in a kind of a grand scale. But the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation with the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine have announced supports for businesses that are struggling during this time from the current COVID-19 situation. So the Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland have a new COVID-19 working capital scheme, and that's now open for application. It has been for the last week or two. And that funding will be made available to the banks, to AIB, Ulster Bank, Bank of Ireland. But again, like Paul has said on the wage supplement, etc., there are eligibility criteria, so it's not available to everybody. And it's usually linked where there is a loss in revenue of 15% or more. And excuse me, the voice is going. And so their eligibility criteria on that are linked to innovation, but also to the COVID-19 crisis. So there's an extra limb onto that in terms of how they look at it. Microfinance Ireland are also, providing support to small businesses. Again, they are looking at businesses that have had a reduction in capital or in revenue and profit of up to 15% or more. And, they are talking to people who can't get finance from the ordinary commercial lenders. Applications for that are available on their website. And then I think the local enterprise offices are providing fantastic support in terms of business continuity and advisory support specifically for this COVID-19 crisis. And again, there's lots of those local enterprise offices. A lot of the startups are already familiar with them because they're dealing with them for their smaller loans and grants. And I think they should contact those enterprise offices to get a little bit more detail on what's available to them. But again, these are all new. They're all kind of new focus on COVID-19. So I don't have a great amount of feedback yet on what's the follow through on them. I think we'll see that more and more in the coming weeks and months.
Very good. And Orla, I know you've also been dealing with some issues arising with your clients around working from home and security issues around that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this happened quite quickly, and some companies were used to dealing remotely and had that was no issue for them. They had their policies in place. It came quite quickly at the very end where everybody had to kind of work from home unless you're an essential service. And therefore there are a lot of employees now working at home, some of them on personal equipment, and but they're dealing with confidential data, and GDPR still exists regardless of COVID-19, and people's privacy is still very important. So there is a lot of kind of a rush to try and put in place security measures and to make sure that if there is data being processed, it's been done in accordance with the regulations. People are trying to do their best, but there's simple things that can be done in relation to passwords, codes, making sure that equipment is put away safely, particularly for people that are in a, you know, they're living with 4 or 5 other people, and outside maybe a family situation. It's such an unusual situation to have workers that have very detailed, very confidential information, being able to do that from their living room or their bedroom or wherever. And it's just important that that's dealt with and people are concerned about that. So we're trying to put in place policies that aren't overly difficult, but are robust to help them through the next few weeks.
Yeah, we're all on a learning curve here with the use of new technologies and so on. You might have seen that in the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson was having a cabinet meeting with his cabinet and on Zoom, and the meeting ID was clearly visible, possibly making it hackable and so on. So we're all on a learning curve.
Yeah, and that's a big issue as well. I mean, we've even seen it with our own conferencing facilities where it's been used so much now. There's a little bit of crossover, and even though you have security numbers, they're not working as effectively as they had been in the past when people didn't have to use them so often.
Yeah, a contact of mine on LinkedIn put out a post saying a new game to play is randomly select a Zoom meeting ID and see if you can hack into a meeting. Darina and Paula, just to finish off, do you have any top tips for working at home?
I suppose, you know, it has been a challenge. I suppose at DublinBIC, we kind of had, you know, flexible working arrangements with our employees over the last kind of year, where people kind of would work from home when required if they needed to. So we did have, I suppose, some of the policies set up in that regard, but it was just such a quick move. You know, obviously you couldn't plan for like managing your team or managing your meetings. So, you know, we got on Zoom, we got on Teams, and it's working quite well. You know, like, you know, obviously you can run a meeting and, you know, have agenda points and work through sort of different projects. That's good. But I would recommend like having, you know, team calls and having more of a sort of a chat, like, you know, about COVID-19 and non-COVID-19 stuff, and not making, like, you know, continuing that working relationship with your colleagues, because it's so important. For me, what works is like having a routine, like getting up in the morning and, you know, like if I have a meeting, putting on makeup, putting on my work clothes, you know, like just, I suppose, approaching it like a normal work day. I also have, I suppose, reminded of our employees of knowing what's coming down the line, even if your leader's saying, I don't know what's coming down the line, you know, kind of just acknowledging that and kind of just having weekly updates. And I think that's really important too for when you're working at home as well.
Very good. Darina, the final word to you.
Great. Structure is key. Absolutely. Keep your structure in place, like you said, Paula, you know, your daily routine. And the biggest thing is keep connected within a work environment, but also to keep your social contacts going, because it's easy to get almost consumed with work. We're all trying to do as much as we can. But the final thing I would say just on work, we're almost trying to fill a full work day as it normally was. We need to be realistic about our expectations, because we're full-time teachers, full-time parents, full-time house cleaners, cooks now. And what I'm hearing is I just can't fit it all in. And that is the truth. So let's reduce our expectations and stop killing ourselves at the end of the day, because that's not helpful.
Very good. On that note, Paula Finnan from DublinBIC, Darina Mulligan from Camino Coaching, and Orla O'Brien from OBH Partners. Thank you very much for your contributions. I know they'll be deeply valued by the people viewing our videos on the panel at DublinBIC. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, everybody.